I always thought that for me to impress a man, I had to impress them by how much money I made or how ambitious or career driven I was. The biggest thing that I learned was that attraction isn't symmetrical in the sense that what men value is not the same as what women value. Most men will say, I just want a woman who supports me and brings peace and respects me.
Facts.
So those things, like, they're not actually hard to do as a woman.
No.
They're actually quite simple once you know how to give him those things.
Yo guys, welcome back to another episode on my channel. You know I love bringing great guests on to talk about the dating space, giving different perspectives and using the tools we have here to get the results that we want. So I've got a very great guest for you today. She's no stranger to the social media space. Please welcome Hannah Chan. Hello, Hannah.
Hi, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having
Oh,
me.
we are so gassed to have you. We're so gassed to have you. Thank you for coming all this way. How you
You're
feeling?
welcome. I'm feeling good, excited to get it going.
Yeah, for sure. Let's jump right in. Obviously, you're, quite big on TikTok as well, and you've got lots of content on there. Tell us about how that started and what's the mission on there for you?
Yeah, so how that started was a few years ago, I was single. I was hustling, trying to build my business.
Yeah.
And I wanted a man. Like, I don't know what to say apart from the fact that I wanted a man who, as every girl says, would treat me like a queen. So then for so long, I was like, why are all men trash? Why can't I find a good man? Until one of my business mentors said to me, hey, if something's not going well in business, it's always your fault and you have to take accountability. So then I transferred that philosophy into my dating life. And I was like, maybe not all men are trash. Maybe there's something that I'm doing wrong.
Heard that, ladies? Not all men are trash.
Definitely not. A lot are,
A
but there are a
lot
lot
are.
of good men, right?
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, how can I take accountability in my dating life and realize that if I'm not getting the result I want, it could be down to me. Right? So then I started reading books on dating, books on femininity, and just learning what it takes to attract high caliber men. And then I guess those books paid off because I now do have a boyfriend. So then back to TikTok.
Yes.
I was like, okay, my mission is I want to show women how to be like a high value woman in the sense that they work on the mindset, they want to level up so that they can attract the kind of man that they want.
Yeah. Awesome. So what would you, because, we hear these terms, high value man, high value woman. What would you define as a high value woman in your eyes?
Yeah. The first thing is she is growth oriented. So in terms of mindset, I think a high value woman is a woman who she works on herself and she always wants to level up. And she has the habits to reflect it, whether that's journaling, right? Like building that self-awareness for maybe why we aren't at the level that we want to be at. So growth oriented. And then the other one is a woman who's tapped into her feminine energy. Because nowadays, especially because we're so career driven,
Yeah.
and society's almost condition women to think that in order for them to be valuable or respected, they have to make a lot of money or be really career driven.
Yes.
A lot of women in that process, they lose touch of their more like nurturing soft side. So to me, a high value woman is a woman who is still in touch with that side of her
Yeah.
and also has a good relationship with men.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, just the more general stuff like, she's got good morals, she's nice, she's kind, things like that.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So like, I completely hear that. Talk to us about the point where you were like, all men are trash. Because I think a lot of women, have, a lot of women do. We hear them say, oh, men are trash, or at least the guys that they're coming across, they find that most guys that they deal with, they're not the kind of men, they're the kind of men they want that attracts them, but not how they are in a relationship. So talk to us about the transition from, what you used to think about men to maybe what you are now, which helps you find the man you desire.
Yeah.
Essentially.
So I would say I had the typical mindset that a lot of women who've been hurt in the past have about men. Like, you have a few bad experiences with men, and then you generalize that to being all men are trash, like all men lie, all men cheat.
Yeah.
And a large part of that is because of this bias that we have in media on TikTok, right? Like, like someone's more likely to post about their man being a cheater or a liar
Yeah.
than someone in a happy relationship is more likely to post about their man being a good man.
That's so true.
So we already have that bias where like we see more men cheating on social media, but just because it's posted about more.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. And it's also easier for us to believe that the problem is always outside of ourselves. It's like this thing that we do to protect our egos is when something doesn't go as planned, we tend to think that it's not us, it's something outside of us.
Yeah.
When ironically, the answer is normally like within ourselves. And that's where accountability comes from.
Yeah.
Is like we have to be counterintuitive and not just blame other people, but look within and figure out what can I control in this situation.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're so right about on social media, we see the bad stuff because we know it's bad news that makes headlines.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And, you know, most happy couples, they're not on social media posting about their relationship. They're just enjoying their relationship in life. Do you know what I mean? Happy people are quiet, you know, at least online. So what was one thing, would you say, for you that you felt that you had to take? What was one thing that you felt you were doing before that wasn't helping you in finding the kind of man you want?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I always thought that for me to impress a man, I had to impress them by how much money I made or how ambitious or career driven I was.
Yeah.
And how like badass and how hardworking I was in business.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the biggest thing that I learned was that attraction isn't symmetrical in the sense that what men value is not the same as what women value.
Very true.
So because for a lot of women, we tend to value a man who is career driven, you know, makes good money, got a good mindset. We think that men value the same things. But then the biggest realization for me is that men don't value those traits necessarily. They value the complementary traits.
Yeah.
Right?
Nice.
So if I want to attract a masculine man, then the way to attract him isn't by also being masculine and, you know, ambitious, things like that.
Yeah.
It's being the complementary, which is tapped into your feminine.
Yeah. Very true. Now, I fundamentally agree with that. I'm going to challenge you though.
Yeah.
Because when we look at couples in the media like Jay-Z and Beyonce, you know, everyone has this thing of, oh, I want to be a power couple, right? So you have like, you know, the boss babes, you know, who are out here killing it, which is great. But they're like, I want to find my Jay-Z or whatever. And we're both going to be this super power couple who's heavy, ambitious and everything. So arguably, if that is what people are seeing, like, and I'm going to use Jay-Z and Beyonce as an example, is that something that's not realistic for people? Because, I mean, it seems to be working for them being a power couple, quote unquote. So, which is kind of, you know, I guess, you know, she's super ambitious, she's, you know, crazy successful and stuff like that. So, like, what would you say to that kind of someone who looks at them and go, well, they're a power couple, so why can't I do that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's more about how they interact within their relationship and the dynamic between them two, not necessarily the career that they both have.
Yes.
So to give you an example, my boyfriend is a business owner and I'm also a business owner.
Yeah.
So in the same industry, we do get the comment like we're a power couple, but behind the scenes, we aren't both, we don't both have that same energy. So the biggest difference for me is in business, I can bring that boss babe persona. And a lot of the time it is, you do need a bit of that to get stuff done.
100%.
But it's mainly about knowing how and when to switch that off in the relationship.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely something I always advocate for, you know, manifesting the quote unquote masculine qualities to help in your career. But then if you are looking for a certain kind of guy, you need to nurture those other sides of you, like you said, within the relationship. So you were recently featured on Lad Bible about being, what was their quote? Something about my boyfriend pays for everything. Talk to us. What happened there?
Okay. So the made up quote, which I have to emphasize was completely made up, I never said, was I make my boyfriend pay for everything. I'm an investment and I should be spoiled. So that's the quote that they decided to make up. And the backstory was I post TikTok dating content and I had a video go viral about what I bring to the relationship versus what my boyfriend brings to the relationship.
Right.
Now, a journalist called me and she was like, hey, I saw your video. I would love to do a story to like show people the dynamic of your relationship.
Yeah.
And me, knowing journalism is like a bit, can be twisted. I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I would love to share the message,
Yeah.
but only if you can promise me that like it doesn't get twisted. So she was like, of course, like no problem. I'll write it and everything gets approved by you before we like release it.
She said that to you.
Yeah. So I was like, great. She writes the article. She calls me 2 weeks later and she goes, hey, I've written it. I'm going to read it back to you. We can edit it together before we release it. The version she wrote was great, right? It basically showcased how men and women can bring different sorts of values to the relationship.
Yeah.
So I signed off on it. I was like, this is great. Like, perfect. I love it. And then they sold it to the tabloids. Like the Mirror and Lad Bible and Puberty and other, I guess, news outlets.
Yeah.
And that's when it got changed.
Ah.
The tabloids changed it. And so I remember like even after it got released, I was talking to the journalist.
Yeah.
And she was like, hey, unfortunately, we don't control what they do with it once we sell it to them.
Right. Okay. So they put their own spin to get clicks.
Exactly.
So is it true? Does your boyfriend pay for everything?
So no and yes. It depends on what you say by everything.
Okay.
So he pays all of our rent.
Yeah.
And in terms of bills, it's very much 50-50 depending on like, like some stuff is still in my name because he moved into my place, not the other way around.
Sure.
So some stuff is still in my name. But for the stuff that's not on direct debit, it would be both of us depending on whose card is easier, things like that.
Of course.
So he does pay for like all our rent.
Yeah.
Whenever we go on dates, he pays. When we go on holiday, he pays. And the main thing I want to focus on is he pays, but not because I make him, but because he wants to pay because he believes that the man should be the provider in the relationship.
I hear
So
that.
there are still some things that I pay for myself, like the stuff that has nothing to do with him. So if I want to go shopping, for example, I'll pay for myself. If I'm going out with my friends, I'll pay for myself. Occasionally, like he wants to pay for me, but it's just like on a case-by-case basis.
I hear that. So what if, for example, I don't know, what if, for example, you go out on a date and he's like, oh, babe, can you get this one? Would you be good to do that?
Yeah, I would. Because if he's paying like 99% of the stuff that we share,
Yes.
if I'm occasionally like, babe, like, I'll get this one.
Yeah.
He'll probably laugh at me and be like, don't be silly.
Yeah.
But if it was, it's happened where like his card gets declined because the bank flags it, I'll just use my card and it's fine.
Okay. And you're not like, oh, babe, make sure you transfer me. Like,
No. That's the thing in our relationship is it's not like, it's not the whole like flatmate situation where
you're not
like
keeping track.
yeah, like you owe me £1 for the tissue roll, so make that sort of thing.
Now, give me that pound, innit? Give me the pounds. I want the pound for the tissue, all right? I paid for that. Times are hard. I love that. That's so funny. So I think, because I think seeing the article, I saw it blow up and I was like, oh, I wonder how Hannah's feeling about this. Because it does definitely give the impression of you're like, oh, my man pays for everything and I'm just kind of chilling, doing whatever I want or whatever. That's definitely how they painted it. And I guess it's, like you said, it's kind of, the foundation of the basis from where that comes from is true, but it's not so much, like you said, that you're just, what's the word? It's not like a tyrannical thing. Like, this is my cash pig, basically, just paying for this lifestyle.
And like, I get it. That's what sells is essentially they painted me as a gold digger who does nothing all day and painted him as a simp who got manipulated into paying.
Yeah. Which does happen a lot.
It does happen a lot. And what they conveniently left out was the fact that I made like 4 times more money than my boyfriend when we first started dating. Yeah. Right. And I also still make my own money. Yeah. And that's the sad thing about the media now is there are a lot of people who are single and unhappy because the media tries to portray a happy relationship as a joke. Yes. Like as a woman, if you have a standard where you want a man to provide for you, then suddenly you're a gold digger. Whereas as a man, if you have that mindset where you want to be the provider,
Yeah.
then suddenly it's toxic masculinity.
Yes.
And that's why I think so many people nowadays are finding it harder and harder to date, because women have been encouraged to step more into the masculine and men have been encouraged to be more feminine.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I think on the thing, what I would say is I don't think it's that if men want to provide that makes them toxic. I would say that I think, and you can tell, you can, if you're happy to share this with your own relationship. I think for a lot of guys nowadays, because of, you know, we have equality and, you know, it's arguably, you know, it's harder to be a quote unquote high value man because now women work and stuff, which is great, but there's more boxes to tick. You have to succeed higher. So it's kind of like, okay, well, if I'm a guy in today's age and I'm paying for everything, best believe I have final say on everything. And I think that's an attitude that a lot of guys who, if they want to be the provider of everything, they're like, well, I have to have the final say on everything. Does that work in your relationship or no?
Yes and no. It depends what you mean by final say. Like, we definitely make a decision as a team, but
Yeah.
ultimately I respect him to trust his decisions.
Yes.
So for example, I never go clubbing or like very, very rarely go drinking. If I do, it's because I want to support my single girls and finding a man or whatever, but I tend to not drink too much alcohol. If I'm wearing something like dressed up for a club, which I don't really even go clubbing, and my boyfriend's like, hey, that outfit is a bit too much. Is it okay if you wear something else? I would respect his decision. Like, I wouldn't just off the bat be like, no, this is misogyny. Like, you can't control what I wear. I would be like, hey, like, I understand, but I also want to know where you're coming from. Right. And then we can find a solution together. So even if we don't necessarily agree eye to eye, I still trust his decision. And at the same time, he makes decisions based on what's best for both of us, not just for him.
Yeah. And I guess, like you said, it takes that level of trust that he's not doing this in a selfish way. He's doing it because he wants to serve the relationship.
Yeah.
What would you say to, because there are a lot of people, a lot of women especially, they would be like, no, that's a very controlling boyfriend if he has a say on what I wear. What would you say to that woman?
It's not so black and white. Like, the first thing I'd say is, are you in a happy relationship, right? Or are you in a relationship at all? Because if you're not having the result that you want, then maybe you should be a bit more open-minded in listening to the people who do have the relationship that you want.
Yeah.
Right? Because if your way of thinking works, then where's the proof?
Where's the results?
And a lot of women who say that, and this isn't like to be mean to women, like, just to make it clear, I'm not hating on women. It's more so that we should be more open-minded to listen to the people who have the result that we want in life.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
We
Now,
should all have a mentor. Go on.
if, like, for a lot of women, they think, like, off the bat, oh, I'll never listen to my boyfriend. Like, my boyfriend can't tell me what to wear. Like, fair enough, right? But it also has to be an open conversation between her and her boyfriend to figure out exactly why he doesn't want her to wear that. Because there's almost always something deeper at play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. How do you know when it's something like, oh, this is because it's a good decision for the relationship, or this is something that he's just being insecure about that he needs to get over? How do you differentiate between the two?
Is this like in my personal relationship?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So my boyfriend is like pretty self-aware in the fact that if he does ever feel insecure, he's pretty open about it.
That's good.
Like,
Yeah.
he'll be like, hey, yeah, you're right. Like, upon reflection, it is a bit just stemming from my own insecurities.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also in relation to that, like, trust goes both ways. So on one hand, I trust him to make the best decision for both of us. But then on the other hand, like, I know that when he makes decisions, he always puts me first. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's so true. I think there is an instinct in men to protect, not just to protect women, but to protect the women they care about, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why, like, it's the whole, like, submission, surrender thing is a lot of women tend to have really negative reactions to the idea of submission
Why do you think that is?
because they have a wrong idea of what submission means. So, you know, because of like BDSM and how it's portrayed in the media,
Yeah.
a lot of people think that submission is you're sacrificing yourself for the benefit of the man and you have to do everything he says even though you don't want to, or like you're lowering yourself for a man, or you're
Right.
making yourself smaller so that he feels bigger.
Yeah.
Now if that's what someone believes about submission, then like fair enough, of course they would be pissed about it, like I would be too.
Yeah, of course.
But for a lot of people who take the time to learn what healthy submission looks like, it's actually not forced upon you. It benefits the woman in a lot of ways too.
Yes.
So in my relationship, I would say that I submit to the right man.
Yes.
Because then in a way it frees me of having the burden of making the difficult decisions. Like if I'm hustling in my business, I'm making a ton of decisions, the last thing that I want to do in the relationship is also have to be the person who deals with making stressful decisions or even like planning the date.
Yeah, no, very true. I think a lot of the time that sometimes we can, you know, I've said this, I've had this conversation with female friends of mine who maybe have a similar view on submission, and they'll be like, oh, well, I did that for this one guy and it went horribly wrong, so I'm never doing that again. Do you know what I mean? And it's almost, you know, one thing that I say is we can give, you know, and it's, if it's for you, then great. If it's not for you, then that's fine. But one thing that I say is we can give the right love to the wrong person.
Yeah.
And then that can then make us give the wrong love to the right person, and we end up losing something amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. It's always with relationships and accountability, it's always 50-50.
Yeah.
In the sense that like it is 50% on the woman to do the inner work so that she's comfortable surrendering, but it's also 50% on the man to be worthy of that submission.
Very true.
And like you said, where women go wrong is they submit to the wrong man.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. What was I oh, is it fair to say, and you don't have to say this, that you have a quote unquote top 20% man?
Yeah.
Yeah. How would you say that you keep the top 20% man for you? What do you do to kind of keep him around and be like, yeah, this is, you know, Hannah's the one I want to continue investing in for as long as?
Yeah. The biggest, or one of the biggest things, is continuing to invest in myself so that I can continue to grow with him and be a better girlfriend for him.
So like what areas do you invest in for yourself?
So I'll just give you an example. Around 6 months ago, so I've always been the kind of person where it's a bit hard for me to be vulnerable and open up. But I know that it's important for my relationship if I want to just create that really strong emotional connection with my boyfriend.
Yeah.
So around 6 months ago, he brought it up to me. He was like, hey, I just don't feel as connected to you. Like, I feel like there are certain times where you don't necessarily trust me, or you are stepping into your masculine when you could work more on yourself to step more into your feminine.
And he said that to you?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he was like,
risky move, boy. That was a risky move.
And so we had that conversation. We sat down and he was like, this is a big thing for me and I want you to work on it. Right. And I want you to work with my life coach on it.
No way.
So I was like, you know what? Fine, I'll do it. It was $12,000 and I did it. And I paid, this was from myself, like my own money, not his money.
Yeah.
I paid. And I was willing to change because he's worth it.
Right.
A lot of people have this mentality where we're like, don't change for a man or never change for a woman.
Yeah.
But who says that change always has to be a bad thing?
Yeah.
And sometimes you can or you should change for the better, especially if it's going to benefit your relationship. Because at the same time, like he's done that for me. Like he's invested tens of thousands of dollars into his own like personal development, so that he can become a better man for me.
Yes.
And so I would hold myself to the same standard as that and do it for him. The other thing that I do to like keep him is I always make sure I'm challenging him and I'm inspiring him to grow. So around a year ago, we were walking to a nail salon.
Yeah.
We were on holiday. He was walking me. He was walking me to the nail salon.
Yes.
And this is a period of time where he was still doing well in business, but he was not pushing as hard and he was kind of demotivated, and it's like he lost his purpose of it.
Yeah.
So when we were walking to the nail salon, I said to him like, hey, I'm sensing something and I want to bring it up to you. And right now I feel like you're not operating at near the potential that you could be right now. And like, as your girlfriend,
Such a good way to say that.
yeah, like
Yeah.
as your girlfriend, I just want to hold you to the standard that like you set for yourself.
Yeah.
So that apparently like lit some kind of fire inside him.
100%.
Over the next 6 months, he like more than tripled his business.
Wow, that's great.
So in terms of what I do to keep him, I don't really think along the lines of like, what specific thing do I have to do? It's more so, how can I continue to challenge him and inspire him to grow?
Yeah, like reach his potential, which is
Yeah.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold that thought. So let's talk about your dating advice for women, right? Do you think it's harder to find commitment nowadays compared to before, or what are your thoughts on that?
What's before? Like,
I guess,
how long ago?
because more people are single today than ever before.
Yeah.
But I'm asking, is that out of choice, or is that out of because it's harder to find?
It's a bit of both.
Yeah.
I don't think it's out of choice. I think people say it's out of choice because it's easy to say that than admit the fact that we're trying to get a man or a woman and we just haven't succeeded in it.
I think that's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the common, because your dating advice is for women, right? So what are some of the common problems that you find they have that your advice is tailoring for or to?
A large thing is accountability, honestly.
Really?
It's
Yeah.
because it's counterintuitive, right? Like kind of what we spoke about. It's easier for us to blame the other gender or sex than it is for us to look within and ask ourselves, what do I need to do to improve, or who do I need to be
Yes.
in order to attract the kind of man that I want? I get asked like on my TikTok almost every single day, multiple times a day, where do I find a high value man?
Very true.
Right? And that way of thinking, it's not necessarily wrong, but it places all the emphasis on going to the right places.
Yes.
Because it's easier for us to believe that all we need to do is go to the right places. When the real question that we should be focusing on is like, what kind of traits do I need to have in order to attract a high value man?
So you believe if you develop in those traits, that kind of guy will naturally come. I do think there's an element of you do have to go to those places. Like,
Yeah.
if you're, I don't know, for example, like if you're a librarian and you never go out, you never socialize, just librarian at home, then
Yeah.
obviously you have to put yourself out there.
Exactly.
Right? But there's no point putting yourself out there if you don't have the things to attract him in the first place.
Yeah. And it's 50-50. Like, it is 50% getting yourself out there more, which is a huge problem. Is how many times, if we leave, like every time we leave our doorstep as a woman, as a single woman, how often do we actually interact with a man? Whether it's at Starbucks in line or in
Yeah.
the elevator.
Very true.
The more people we interact with as a byproduct, the more men we're gonna potentially date.
Yeah.
So
So true.
if every time we leave our door, we just speak to like one person a week, like one guy a week, and let's say every 1 in 10 man is a high value man,
Yeah.
it would take us 10 weeks just to go on a date with one potential high value man.
Very true. Yeah, that's a good way. I like numbers. That's a good odds. Yeah, for sure.
It's true, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we're just like on our phones, on Tinder, on Hinge, like swiping all the time, and the conversation goes dead.
Yeah.
If we focus on just having more conversations, more everyday conversations,
Yeah.
every time we leave our door, then that's just going to increase your chances of meeting the right person.
I hear that. So one thing I would say though is that in the current landscape of dating and stuff, a lot of guys are, for example, they're afraid to approach in public. And partly because it's a very difficult thing to do, but also because of no guy wants to be accused of being a creep, right? And while there are some guys who are definitely creeps, Majority of guys aren't.
Yeah.
So, and especially if a guy, quote unquote, if he's not saying a high value man can't be a creep, but if he's in a position where he is loved, admired, and respected, he's probably quite intelligent to know where the lines are, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a woman and let's say you're getting to a point where you're interacting with guys who could be high value men, is there anything that, for example, you did or you think is good for women to do that can show that they're an open opportunity for a man to approach?
As a woman, the biggest one is body language, right? Like smile, make eye contact, and don't be looking down on your phone. When we're alone, we've been conditioned because we don't want to feel awkward and make eye contact. Even though, like, you know, a lot of us, we walk into a room or we walk into a bar and we're waiting for our friends. The first thing we do is take out our phones, pretend to be texting, stand in the corner so we don't feel awkward.
Yeah.
But what if we put our phones away and focused on being present in the environment?
Is that what you did?
And just looking up. Oh, to meet my boyfriend? No, we met on Facebook.
Did you?
Yeah.
See, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, we're in the same industry. But also, I totally think it's okay for women to approach a man too.
Yeah.
I think a lot of men who are more respectful of women are actually the ones who are more scared to approach women because they don't want to come across the wrong way.
100%.
And because nowadays it's very difficult to judge how a woman would react.
Yes.
Even if a man was polite, the woman could just be rude and say something rude. And guys have this thing I call like rejection resistance, where the main reason they're scared to approach a girl isn't because they're scared to approach her, it's how she's going to react to him.
Yeah, of course. That's a good point, actually. Yeah.
That's why a lot of men who do approach women are the men who are more like lower quality in the sense that they're just using the spray and pray method.
Yeah, 100%.
Of like hey, you look hot. And they'll talk to 100 women and see which woman sticks.
They're like, out of 100, surely one's got to stick.
Exactly.
Surely one's got to give me a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true.
I actually think that as a woman, it's okay to start the conversation with a man because he's probably more scared than you are. And you just have to start the conversation in a really low resistance way and then let him take over. Yeah,
I always say this all the time, especially nowadays, like, guys, you don't have to be passive. You know, if you see a guy that you think you want, go after him. Okay, so how would they do that? Because it's all good saying, yeah, I think you should do it. But like, so let me give you a scenario. Okay. So let's say you're at a restaurant with your girlfriends and you see a guy, let's say he's at dinner with a couple of his friends. And you're like, oh, I like the look of him. I like what he's wearing. I like his energy. How would you go about in that situation, maybe getting his attention?
Yeah. Smile, right? The obvious one is like smile, make eye contact.
Yes.
And then the next time you guys are at the restaurant bar, just stand next to him, ask him like, hey, what drink do you recommend?
So easy. So easy, guys.
So people think it's hard because they think that they have to go in straight away with the frame of hitting on the other person.
Yes.
Like, you're beautiful, or I love your eyes.
Yeah.
Of course, like that's more uncomfortable. But if you go in with the mentality of, let me at first pretend I'm making a friend and then switch to a more like flirty dating kind of frame, then that's a much easier in. And worst case scenario is he's like, I don't know what my favorite drink is, like, bye, right? And it's not exactly like he rejected you because you were just asking about what his favorite drink is or what he recommends.
Yeah, so it's like hitting on them without them really seeing that you're hitting on them.
Yeah, it's like low resistance. It's almost rejection proof because you're not even really hitting on them. You're not saying anything flirty. You're just getting the conversation started.
That's true.
So the best way to look at it is, instead of thinking like, how can I flirt and show interest from the first second, it's more so like, what can I do to use the context or the environment to start the conversation?
100%. I think especially because, one, guys, like you said, guys are never expected to get approached. But also, if he looks at you and thinks you're attractive, he's going to take over in that conversation anyway. Because he's like, oh my gosh, this is my in. Let me quickly talk to her. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Like you said, a guy who's got that good like leadership intuition, he'll know how to take over the conversation. And then if he's interested, he might ask for your number.
So true. Is there anything you want to bring up? Anything you want to bring to the table that we can chat about? Anything specific?
Let's talk about the idea of paying on the first date.
Ooh, okay.
And like, who should pay, who shouldn't pay? Like, what do you do if the guy wants to split? Like, what do you think about that?
Okay, so my view on paying on the first date is, if we're going from the conventional sense that a guy asked a girl out, I think that he should pay on the date, but I think that she should offer to pay her share. And it's not about the money, it's about the lack of gesture. Because, at least the way I see it, is the most polite, where the most polite she's going to be is right now. If she's not offering now, what kind of precedent does that set for the relationship? If she expects me to pay, even though I'm prepared to pay, if she expects me, I'll be honest, that's a level of entitlement that I'm not here for. Because I think most guys don't mind paying, but they just want it to be appreciated.
Yeah.
And when you expect something, you don't have a level of appreciation for it. But that's my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah.
I think that the man should pay, but the woman should at least offer once to pay.
Yes.
Now, that said, it's a highly, highly contextual, right? So, for example, if the bill comes right away and he grabs the bill with full intention of paying, then at that point, I might not necessarily offer, but I will show extra appreciation and say like, hey, thank you so much. I really appreciate you paying.
100%.
So it is all contextual to like the way the bill is presented, how he picks it up, things like that.
Yeah.
And like you said, a lot of the time, like, because I've interviewed a lot of men on this, they have full intention of paying, but they are noticing whether the girl offers or not.
I'll be honest, it's a bit of a shit test. It's the first shit test I think guys give girls, and guys don't really give that many shit tests, but I definitely think it is, for sure.
Yeah. And on my TikTok, so I actually made a video about this. It was, what do you do when the bill comes? And my advice was, you should offer to pay once, but don't fight him on it. Like,
100%.
don't wrestle him with the bill, because at the end of the day, like, if a man is a provider, he does genuinely want to pay.
Yeah.
And you should offer once to show appreciation. But when you start like being really uncomfortable with him paying and really arguing with him about wanting to pay your share, then that in itself can sometimes give off the wrong vibe to the man, because it shows that as a woman, you're not necessarily open to receiving, which is one thing that a provider kind of man looks for.
Yeah.
Is that a woman is in her feminine and she's open to receiving and she appreciates it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, the feminine receives. I mean, even sexually, like the feminine receives the masculine, right? No, that is so true. One thing that, what would you say to women who, for example, will say, well, I don't want to let a man pay for me because I don't want to feel like I owe him something. Because I think that's a justified feeling. Like, girls will be like, oh, well, if I let him pay for me, then I feel like I kind of owe him either to go on another date or maybe even owe him something sexually, right?
Yeah.
So what would you say to that?
And I used to think like that too. Like, that was the same period of time when I would think like men are trash, all men just want to hook up.
Yeah.
That belief comes from a limiting belief that the woman doesn't feel like she's worthy of a man who genuinely wants to pay for her out of the goodness of his heart.
Yeah.
Right? And B, it comes from the belief that there are no good men out there.
Yeah.
So instead of thinking that, like, why don't we reframe that belief of, hey, maybe there are men out there who genuinely want to pick up the bill, not because they expect something in return, but they believe in being a gentleman.
Yeah. No, it's true. They are out there. You just have to choose them.
Yeah.
You just have to choose them. Okay. So let's say you've got a 28-year-old professional woman. She looks after herself. Career's going well. She's struggling to find, she's a serial dater, constantly dating guys for like 2 or 3 months, never works out because maybe he doesn't want to commit, or he moved, or she's like, he's too short, whatever it is. What are the first things, let's say first 2 or 3 things you would ask her to try and diagnose maybe where she could improve on or grow in, shall we say?
Yeah. First thing they should do is write out, how do they feel about men and why?
Yeah.
The reality that we get is a reflection of the beliefs that we have.
Yes.
So if a woman is, it's great, she's dating, she's getting herself out there,
Yeah.
but she's still not getting the results that she wants, then obviously it can be down to the man, but it's also down to what are the beliefs that are getting in the way of her getting the result that she wants.
100%.
For example, if it goes back to like, if we believe that all men are dickheads,
Yeah.
right? Or that the honeymoon phase is only ever going to be 3 weeks, and then the guy starts becoming a dick.
Yeah.
If I have that belief as a woman, then at the 3 week mark, I'm going to start self-sabotaging. I'm going to start maybe picking fights with the guy. I'm going to start being paranoid
You
about
start
whether
looking
he's
for
cheating.
anything that suggests
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Looking
100%.
for evidence to reaffirm my belief.
Yeah.
And then because my behavior is suddenly switching, it's going to rub off onto him, and he's probably it's going to cause tension in the relationship.
Yeah.
And then when it does and he breaks it off, then she's going to think, I knew it. Like, all men cheat. The honeymoon thing doesn't last.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the time, like, our beliefs make us self-sabotage good relationships.
Yeah.
Now, that's obviously what we can do, like, as the woman. And there is the man part of it too. Like, of course, you could just be, dating the wrong men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it takes two to tango.
Exactly.
It takes two to tango. There's one thing I wanted to ask you. Just because you probably got this in the interview as well. Back to your guy kind of paying for everything. And it's a challenging one. What do you do in return that maybe other women don't do in their relationships? So what is it? Because I think nowadays for a guy to be paying for everything, that's not the norm.
Yeah.
Right. So what do you bring, or what do you give that's not the norm that he gets for that, essentially?
Yeah. So a lot of what I bring to the relationship isn't always the tangible things that can be quantified.
Sure.
If we look at masculine and feminine, by default, masculine is logic, structure, hardworking, right? So what the masculine brings is he provides, and that can be quantified, like money, rent, food.
Sure.
What the feminine brings, it's not it's more of an abstract thing.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to put in a number. But what I would say is I challenge him to grow, and I inspire him to become a better version of himself. So let's take business, for example.
Yes.
If I have the I guess like the substance or the intellect or the awareness to challenge him when he's not stepping up, then that's gonna allow him to go from making, for example, like 100K a year to 500K a year.
Yeah.
And so with that reasoning, you could argue that my presence helped him, gave him an extra like $400,000 a year worth of value.
I see what you're saying.
And that's the first thing. The second thing is I bring all the complementary traits that a lot of women have almost, they aren't aware about, or they've lost touch with because they've never been taught.
Yes.
This is a huge one that I had to educate myself, is how to not nag your boyfriend and communicate in a way that doesn't emasculate him. That sounds so simple, but I speak to men and apparently it's rare.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's well, I think, give us an example. Can you give us an example?
Yeah. So an obvious one is I would never make him look bad in front of his friends, like make fun of him in a way that it actually hurts. Like banter's fine, but I'd never purposely do anything to make him look bad or emasculate him or second guess him. Another example is if he's not necessarily, for example, if he like leaves his socks all over the house, right? Typical guy thing, whatever. I'm not gonna be like, oh my God, you always leave your socks around the house. It's so annoying. Why are you such a child?
Yes.
I'd be like, hey, I've noticed you do this. It's really important that we both try to keep the house clean.
Yes.
How can I help you to make sure that you don't do this?
I feel like you're like the queen at knowing how to say something.
it's positive reinforcement,
So
and
true.
it's almost like boundaries.
Yeah.
It's knowing how to communicate something without putting the other person down.
Yeah, 100%,
And
100%. And in that example as well, like, um, I'm really bad. I should remember the book I was reading this from. Um, in all our relationships in life, there's two types of relationships. It's either adult or child and parent. And in that situation where you're like, oh, you leave your socks all over the house, like, why are you such a child? It's like you step into the parent and you feel like a parent, like, why am I babying my boyfriend? And then that gets his back up because subconsciously he feels like I'm being treated like a child here. I'm a freaking man. Like, who does this, like, if I want to leave my socks over the place, I'm going to do it. And
yeah,
it starts that fight, doesn't it? But when you come from a place of like, look, I've noticed this and stuff. How can we work together so that this doesn't happen? Because we both want the house to be clean. Like, you automatically, like, you come from an adult and he's going to receive in an adult way as opposed to getting his back up if he's, you
yeah,
know, the right kind of guy. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean?
And there's, in my opinion, even to most people, there's a bit of that rebel in a man where he thinks, because she's saying it to me in such a mean, rude way, I'm not gonna do it just because she said it to me like
So
that.
true. So true. We can be petty sometimes. We can be petty.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
back to your question, like what are the kind of things that I bring? For
Yeah.
women, in order to keep a high value man, it doesn't have to be some sort of grand gesture that you spend thousands of dollars into planning.
Yeah.
It's more about how can you make the small everyday situations count and appreciate those things. So I'll make him, when he's busy working, for example, I will make him a cup of tea and say like, hey, make sure you're staying hydrated.
Yeah.
Or because I know that he really likes my cooking, I'll do a cooking class so that I can be even better at cooking and make the stuff that he likes.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about what I bring to the table, what a woman should bring to the table, I don't think it should just be about cooking, cleaning, and sex,
Yeah.
because any woman can do that. Or it doesn't take intellectual growth to do those things, if that makes sense.
100%.
Like if a
Yeah.
man just wanted those things, he could hire a chef or a cleaner.
He could
or
pay
a
for all
cook.
of those things, literally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So to stand out as a woman, it's more about what are the abstract, the intangible things that you can bring to
Yeah.
his life.
I think one thing, because, if you're a guy of value or, you're a guy who have options, right? And it is true to a certain extent that if a guy has options and he's not looking to settle down, he's going to be playing around, like he's going to be, because guys like sexual variety, right? But one thing that I definitely have said to women and to guys, because I think women hear, oh, well, if I come across this kind of top guy, like it's impossible for me to get his commitment, right? But that a guy, don't underestimate the value of a guy being with the right woman compared to a lot of women.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an argue of, how many guys feel there's the right kind of women out there that they're coming across. But I've said this to guys are like, well, yeah, if I have the options, I'm just going to play the field, whatever. And I'm like, well, okay, but if you meet that one right woman who brings something that you see the others don't, that's so much more value than just being like, okay, I can have 5 different girls a week.
Exactly. That's like the topic of like the game changer versus the placeholder,
Oh,
if you've kind of
100%.
heard that term.
Yeah.
But if we think about what men look for in a woman, most men will say, I just want a woman who supports me and brings peace and respects me.
Facts.
So those things, they're not actually hard to do as a woman.
No.
They're actually quite simple once you know how to give him those things.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And did you learn to give these things through, like you said, the books you read or whatever, or was it kind of, oh, I'd heard about these things before, but I don't want to conform to that because a man should, like take me exactly how I am or something like that?
Yeah. It's more so I didn't know that men valued those things so much, along with they all kind of fall under the umbrella of femininity.
Yes.
And I was just straight up unaware of the fact that there was such dynamic as masculine and feminine. I always thought it was some bullshit super spiritual thing.
Yeah.
So I always thought that I had to get a guy by impressing him based on like how much of a badass I was in business.
Yeah,
Turns out
yeah,
it wasn't the
yeah.
case.
Yeah.
And like you said, for men who are really on their path and on their mission,
Yeah.
they don't necessarily look for a woman who also brings the finances. They just look for a woman who supports him and
Yes.
encourages him and like keeps him on track to achieve great things in life.
100%. So I'm going to ask something for the guys. What are a few masculine traits that maybe you personally find attractive and that you think maybe, you know, women like yourself find attractive?
A man who is ambitious and he's on his path,
Yeah.
meaning that what women say they want is different than what they subconsciously want.
Yeah.
It's the same with men in some way. So for example, a woman will say, I want a man who puts me first, or I want a man who I'm his number one.
Yeah.
And women might say that, but they don't subconsciously want that.
Yeah.
They want a man who puts his purpose number one and his
Yes.
mission number one.
Yeah.
Because once he starts making her his top priority in life, she actually loses respect and loses interest for him because he
100%.
becomes a bit too soft and needy.
Yes.
So the advice I would give men is focus on, like, you know that you're probably meant for great things in life. You know that you can achieve a lot more than what you're achieving right now, whether it's climbing up the corporate ladder or starting your business or doing a side hustle.
Yeah.
Focus on that. And if a woman can see how driven you are and how ambitious you are, then that will be super attractive to her.
Yeah. 100%. Have you heard of the book, The Way of the Superior Man?
Yes, I've read it too multiple times.
So yeah, I've read it twice. And it sounds controversial, but actually it's really helpful for women if you read that book to understand the right kind of man to choose depending what you're looking for. But one thing in the book, and you remember this if you've read it, where he talks about the man who has been called, he's been drafted for the war.
Yeah.
He's been called to fight in the army, and obviously his wife doesn't want him to go. She's crying, I don't want you to go, but he's like, no, I have to go.
Yeah.
And it's like she's outwardly saying, I don't want you to go. But if he actually turned around and goes, you know what, instead of fighting for the country, I'm going to stay home just for you, she would for sure lose respect for him. And part of her is actually saddened by that.
Yeah.
Because he has a greater purpose that she can see, right? And he has the chance to grow and become, you know, be more capable as a man and the potential. But by putting her first, he sacrificed that. And actually, she actually loses respect for him. And ultimately, I don't think women can love a man they don't respect.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, as women, we deep down, I think we want a man who puts his mission first before us. But it doesn't mean that he makes us feel like number two.
That's right.
It just means that we see he's clearly on his path.
Yes.
And he knows that he's destined to do great things and that he works hard.
Yeah. So I guess looking at it for the woman's side, should a woman be putting her career mission purpose before her man?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
It's also controversial.
Yeah.
Especially
That's
because,
why I asked it.
Yeah. Especially because of feminism.
Yes.
If I say, like, I think a woman should put her family and her husband first, then the feminists are going to get pissed off at me, right? So
Well,
here's what I think. I think a woman should put herself first in the sense that she doesn't necessarily sacrifice what she doesn't want for the wrong man.
sure.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
But
yes.
there's also that false dichotomy. Like, I do think a woman can continue to be career driven and also be successful at raising a child at the same time.
Of course.
So long as she's in touch with her more nurturing side in the context of being with a family.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so is there anything that a guy can do to regain respect if he's lost it from a girl and she's starting to drift from him?
I think it depends on the reason she lost respect for him in the first place.
Right.
So, you know, let's take that situation where the guy is not on his purpose, like he's lazy, he doesn't do what he doesn't honor his commitment.
Right.
Like he says he'll do something and then he doesn't do it.
Yeah, it's a
and
big
they live
one.
together. Like in those situations, the woman feels like she has to step into that masculine role.
Yeah.
And that's why she's now telling him, do this, clean up, like, why aren't you doing anything? And so in that situation, she's lost respect for him.
Yes.
Because then he's being the kind of timid one that doesn't care, and she's the one leading the relationship.
Yes.
So in those cases, I do think that it's possible for a man to regain respect, but it has to be shown and not told.
Yes.
Like he has to start committing to becoming a better man and to working on himself and to being the man again. And then once she sees that, then I think they can flip the dynamic again.
Yeah, and I think that's so true, because I think what can often happen is that, and this obviously isn't okay, but when a guy feels that he's lost the respect in a relationship, there are a small percentage of men who can resort to like violence because they feel this is the only way I can gain the respect is by her to fear me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which arguably I'd say that's obviously that's not the kind of guy we should be with.
Yeah.
We talked about being career driven as a woman, and saying about, okay, which isn't, I don't want us to say, oh, if you're career driven as a woman, it's a bad thing.
Yeah,
I don't want to say that
exactly,
it's
yeah.
a bad thing, but obviously, like you said, that usually it takes to nurturing masculine qualities in your career to succeed, right? Because that's just what gets results. Do you ever feel like maybe when you're at home, you feel that boss side of you come into a relationship? Is that something you feel you're constantly aware of? Like, how do you manage that? Because you can be like that, but obviously you choose not to be within your relationship.
Yeah. And I am, or at least I'd like to think, extremely self-aware about that, which is why I have, even in like business, I've hired business coaches and they've helped me practice self-awareness. And I hired, like I told you, that coach to help me deepen my relationship with my boyfriend.
Yes.
I am now like very self-aware when I accidentally or can start to step into the masculine in the relationship. For a lot of career-driven women, being career-driven is not the problem.
Yes.
Right? No one's saying give up your career to be feminine. No one's saying that your purpose has to be just staying at home while the man makes money.
Yeah.
The problem doesn't come from you being a boss babe in your career.
Yeah.
It comes from not having the awareness of when to step outside of that energy.
Yeah. And do you feel like for you, is that something that is being aware like a practice for you? Like you have to practice being aware? Do you ever like catch stuff like, I'm actually being a bit like this right now?
Yeah.
Or, really?
Yeah, I can catch myself doing it.
Okay.
So to give you an example, when my boyfriend and I travel a lot, I'm the person I am the person who's extremely uptight.
Right.
And very stressed out over
Yeah.
we have to have everything right. Our passports, online check-in, whatever it is, like
Yes.
COVID PCR test. My boyfriend is the one who tends to be more relaxed in that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And he pays less attention to detail.
Yes.
So part of what I've had to do in my like development for a relationship is I had to learn how to give up control in situations and trust that even though he misses a detail, he has to be the one to fix it.
Yes.
This one time we were in Mykonos and we forgot to do the PCR test
Right.
to fly back to London. And in our relationship, because we think that the man should be the one to lead and like figure out the logistics, we both came to the conclusion that it was kind of like on him that he didn't do it.
Yeah.
So the old me would have stepped into it and be like, why did you forget? Like, I should have done this and taken over.
Yeah.
But that would have been me in my masculine. And in a way, I wouldn't be giving my boyfriend the room to lead. Whereas me in my feminine, like knowing what I know now, I was more like, okay, well, what do we do now? Like, figure something out, right? It's your job to do it.
Yeah.
And it's more so giving him that space for him to also grow as a person too.
Yeah. I think it's
Yeah.
almost like encouragement as well.
Yeah.
I think when no one's perfect and we all have things that we need to improve on, but if there's something about your partner that you're like, oh, I find this really attractive when you do this, like you said, when you kind of give this space and encourage them to grow in the areas that you value, instead of being like, why aren't you like this? Then I think they're more likely, you know, like you said, like that's the inspiration, especially for men,
Yeah.
to be better for his woman.
And a huge part is positive reinforcement.
Yes.
Men want to really feel like they're appreciated for the small things that they do. They want to feel like they're doing something right, and they want to feel like they're rewarded for it.
Yeah.
And there
Yeah.
are some things that men do that women might say, oh, that's bare minimum.
Yeah.
I see this all the time on TikTok, where sometimes I'll post some stuff that my boyfriend does for me, and people will be like, oh, that's bare minimum.
Yeah,
like,
it's
why
bare
are you
minimum.
rewarding bare minimum?
Yes.
And like, let's say he buys me flowers, for example, regardless of whether it's bare minimum or not, we should never be like, oh, well, I'm not rewarding you for bare minimum. I'm not thanking you, because he's just going to do it less.
Exactly.
When we should do the opposite and show extra appreciation if he gets you flowers. Like, tell him how much it meant to you, take pictures of you and the flowers, send it to him,
Yeah.
things like that. And because he can sense your appreciation, he feels rewarded for it, and he wants to do the bigger things.
100%. I almost think, and you can tell me if you think this is true or what you think it comes from. But when you see, you know, a boyfriend doing something for his girlfriend, and people are like, oh, that's the bare minimum, I feel like it almost comes from a place of, I'm saying it's a bare minimum because I want him to do more. But then it's
Yeah.
almost like, well, actually, by appreciating that, that is actually inadvertently going to get him to do more, because he's inspired to do more then.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And also this whole idea of like, oh, it's bare minimum. Like, is it though? Because what you say is bare minimum. Like, what a lot of women say is bare minimum
Yeah.
is very different from what they put up with in person as bare minimum.
Yeah.
Like, women think that bare minimum is getting you flowers, but the same woman saying that's bare minimum are the ones who are waiting for a guy to text them back after 5 days because they went home with them after he paid like $10 for her burrito.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, so bare minimum isn't what you say is bare minimum. It's
Yeah.
what are you actually putting up with in your life.
100%.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Let's talk about sex. Do you think it matters how a woman uses sex with a guy? I don't mean literally how she does it, but let's say, for example, when she sleeps with him. Like, does it matter if she sleeps with him on the first date? Does it matter if she sleeps with him after they spent a certain amount of time together? Like, what's your opinion on that?
I think most women have sex with a guy too early for the wrong reasons. And it's not because she wants to or she's comfortable with it. It's because she thinks it's what she has to do to keep his interest.
Very true.
So
Yeah.
in reality, if a guy really likes a girl, he'll be willing to wait a much longer than she thinks,
Yeah.
right? But the issue is women are giving it up for the wrong reasons.
Yes.
And as men, they have the whole like post-nut clarity thing, right?
Yeah.
Where they think they like a girl and then they sleep with her and then it turns out that they didn't actually like her that much.
Yeah. Yeah. What can you explain further into post-nut clarity? Because I think a lot of girls don't understand, or they think, oh, well, if he sleeps with me and then realizes, and then he's suddenly like, oh, I don't actually like you, then you just lied and manipulated me to get me into bed, right? So what would you say to that? Because I think it can be hard for guys to explain what that actually is.
Yeah. There's a difference between a guy knowingly manipulating you
Yes.
versus a guy genuinely thinking like he liked you until after you guys had sex.
Yeah.
So the first one was intentional, he was using you. The second one is like he was just being silly.
Like, he thought it was one thing and it was actually something else.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I think that's
Yeah.
fair.
And this isn't to obviously excuse like the guys or anything, but it's more
course.
so that as women, how can you be more selective with the guys who see that side of you?
Yeah. And one thing I
Yeah.
always say, that how a guy treats you after sex is a reflection of his real intentions with you.
Yeah.
Like, for
Yeah.
sure. For sure.
Yeah. And a huge thing for women too is don't just judge a guy based on what he has, but judge him based on what he does to pursue you. There's a lot of men who they know they can get girls easily because they're 6'2", they earn six figures, they're attractive, they have a bit of charisma.
Yeah.
And because of those things, a woman might be like hypnotized by that.
Very true.
So she'll suddenly lower her standards.
Yeah, lower her standards for the behavior and treatment she receives. Right.
Exactly.
So true.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Because she's hypnotized by it. And so all a man has to be, in a way, is somewhat attractive and somewhat charming.
Yeah.
And for a lot of women, they fall for it. But the key to not fall for that as women is to not judge a guy based on, how tall he is or what job he has, but judge him based on how does he treat you and how does he pursue you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
And the test to kind of ask yourself is, if he was still ugly and poor, would I let him get away with it?
It's so true. And you know what? Guys do the same thing. As in, like, the more attractive a girl is, the more bullshit he's willing to accept and tolerate. And foolishness that he'll do because, blinded by her beauty. That's a real thing. Yeah. That's a real thing. One last thing. So, you are with, a quote unquote high value man that you value, you love and respect. Let's say he wants to get married. Would you sign a prenup?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why would you sign it?
Because first, it's more of like a governmental thing. So
True.
Apparently, if you don't sign it, the government actually has more say in who gets the assets, meaning that the government gets the assets if, like, he dies, for example.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's
just
true.
Purely to make sure the government isn't taking the majority of the assets, we'd want to predetermine, like, who gets what. Yeah. And the second thing is, I think we have similar net worths. Yeah. So signing a prenup would benefit the both of us.
Benefit. So if let's say his net worth was quadruple yours, would you still be like, I'll still sign it?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. What would you say to girls who say, but that's not romantic, that's being pessimistic, like,
Yeah. It's not so much being pessimistic. It's more so having an understanding of if the roles were reversed. Like, it's just being pragmatic.
Yes.
It's the same as, even though maybe you've dated someone and you guys are 2 months in and you have the intention of getting married, it still doesn't mean you're going to get married tomorrow, because there's an element of being, like, pragmatic.
It's very true. Things can change. Things can change. Listen, Hannah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Like, thank you so much for coming on. Where can we find you on the socials?
My TikTok is at Real Hannah Chan, and my Instagram is Real Hannah Chan as well.
Yes, go check her out. Ladies, definitely check out her TikTok. She got some golden nuggets on there for you for sure. I mean, I know I'm the guy and I'm giving you the guy's perspective, but she has a lot of in-depth feminine stuff that maybe I'm not exactly privy to that you can definitely learn from. So Hannah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you. And guys, I will see you in the next video. Pow.